everybody, it's Jackson Fulcher. I'm sorry I couldn't deliver a in-person review for this entire week. I pretty much, what I said at the beginning of my Bloodshot review has kind of continued on throughout this entire week. I've lost a lot of motivation to do anything. I'm going to try to work on it, and my beginning step for that is to make this video, the 2019 catch-up. I figure, hey, since it's almost April in 2020, I guess now's the time to finally wrap up my thoughts on every single film that I've also seen in 2019. Fuck it, I've got nothing else to do today. There's still some movies that I haven't seen, like the Addams Family movie, Lucy in the Sky. Stuber, I know everyone was probably excited to hear my thoughts on Stuber, so if I don't mention a movie on here, it's either because I've already covered it either in a review or in my best or worst list, or it's because I just haven't seen it. These are going to be very quick, rapid fire, because there are a lot of movies here that I did not review. I apologize for that, obviously, but let's just get through this, First up, we have The Upside. It's a remake of a French film called The Untouchables, if I remember correctly, and this was a decent remake. It was a decent American remake. It's not perfect or anything. I think The Untouchables is a little bit of a better movie too. I don't even think that's a perfect film, but I do think it's a little bit better than this, and it is one of those movies where you're like, I don't know why you had to just remake it just for these dumb Americans who can't read subtitles. I'd rather you force people to read subtitles, but it's fine. It was decent enough. Kevin Hart was good, and Bryan Cranston's obviously great too. The last laugh was painful to get through, I found. I thought it was really cringy. It was definitely not a good way for Netflix to kick off the year, because this was the first Netflix film I saw, I believe this was the first Netflix film I saw. It was not a very good sign, and neither was this, Polar. This was aggravating to watch. The first couple minutes, it really got under my skin as far as annoying goes. There are a couple redeeming aspects that I've picked out as the film kind of went on, but this movie just, I would not recommend it. It was really, really a chore to sit through. Miss Bala, I was going in thinking this was going to be a Peppermint remake, but then after I saw it, I was just kind of like, actually, it's not really like Peppermint with Jennifer Garner at all. It's not really action-packed at all, it has moments of action, and then Gina Rodriguez near the end, if I remember correctly, finally picks up a gun and does some stuff, but it's not like that the entire film, so I guess they tried to handle it a little bit more realistically than I expected, but still, it just wasn't my cup of tea. It's not really a good movie. I found it quite generic. Velvet Buzzsaw was like my first disappointment of the entire year, because I was really excited for this movie. It had Dan Gilroy attached and Jake Gyllenhaal, and I was really excited to see what he could do with a horror film, but unfortunately this movie I found to be really underdeveloped. I think if it was a Netflix limited series it might be better, but honestly this movie just wasn't for me. It has social commentary about the art world and art forms, so that's kind of cool in concept, but through execution it's not as riveting as I think it thinks it is. What Men Want, I didn't even see What Women Want with Mel Gibson. Sorry if you wanted to know my thoughts on that movie. I didn't see it, but this movie I just found really unfunny. It was really cringy and really intolerable. You're suffering through a lot of characters just acting really stupid just for the sake of comedy, so you get these over-the-top characters and over-the-top acting, and I just really didn't like this movie. Cold Pursuit actually wasn't the Liam Neeson action revenge thriller that I thought it was going to be going in. It's actually a remake of another film. I'm forgetting where it's from originally, but I do want to see that film at some point, because this was actually really good. It kind of reminded me of a Coen Brothers movie as far as like structure goes and as far as like the humor that it has in it, so that was kind of neat. I honestly would recommend you see this if you haven't yet, because I think it didn't do that well at the box office, but it was actually kind of good. High Flying Bird is a Steven Soderbergh movie that he once again shot on an iPhone, very similar to a film of his, Unsane. It came out to Netflix, and it was solid. Sports isn't really my thing, but this movie managed to have some interesting sports stuff in it, I guess. The Prodigy was actually a big surprise. I saw this with a friend of mine who got us in for free because he worked at the movie theater, and we both kind of walked out kind of surprised how much we liked it. I thought it was really cool, and Jackson Robert Scott did a really great job handling this material that was given to him, because it's not easy for a lot of child actors to handle the kind of work that he specifically is given, but he really pulls it off. He's a really great child actor that I hope goes on to have a really successful career, and I hope he doesn't become a burnout. Yeah, that would really suck. Isn't It Romantic wasn't as painful as I kind of expected, because I'm not a huge fan of a lot of Rebel Wilson movies, but it's still just kind of generic at the end of the day. It has plenty of ideas on how to spoof the rom-com genre, but I didn't think they really pushed it far enough in a satisfying way, and a lot of the jokes just kind of fell flat for me. Alita Battle Angel was better than I expected. I was going in because of the delays and because of the trailer, the CGI, I was expecting a train wreck, but it wasn't. It was passable. I know there's a lot of supporters out there that have seen the film and are pushing for a sequel to be made, because it did okay at the box office. It wasn't a huge smash, but it wasn't a flop either, so I know there is a push to make a sequel for this film and continue the franchise. But honestly, I could care kind of less about more Alita movies. This was fine for a first time watch, but I feel like I'd probably get more reading the manga or watching the anime, whichever one came first. I'm pretty sure it's a manga. Fighting with My Family turned out to be much better than I thought. I was going in thinking, all right, formulaic sports kind of movie about family trouble, but it was actually like much better than I thought. It was my first introduction to Florence Pugh, and I loved her in this movie. She was wonderful as her lead character, Paige, and the actual family drama is really interesting, and Stephen Merchant did a really great job. This movie came out before they announced that they were rehiring James Gunn for the director of Guardians of the Galaxy. Obviously, I'm ecstatic that James Gunn is back for that, but after I saw this movie, I was like, you know what? Stephen Merchant might be able to take over Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in a satisfying way, because this movie balanced a lot of drama, but with a lot of funny moments too. Nick Frost is obviously really great. Climax, I know a lot of people like Gaspar Noé films, but I really don't. The only one that I think is alright is Irreversible, and even then I don't think that's a perfect film. This one just really bugged me. I know a lot of people like the visceral nature of this, just the fucking chaos that is unleashed on the screen for this movie, but I just couldn't buy into it, you know. I'm more of a character person. I'm like characters driving the plot, and a plot that is a little bit more interesting than just someone spiked the punch bowl, so now everyone's just losing their minds and the camera's moving constantly. So this movie really wasn't for me. The Hole in the Ground, I didn't know much about going in, but I thought it was a really solid horror film. Obviously not one of A24's best. This isn't as hyped up as a lot of other A24 projects. This is one of their lesser known ones, but I thought it was actually pretty solid, and I definitely recommend you check it out for a kind of dark and really intense, scary film in a couple scenes. Triple Frontier actually turned out a little bit better than I thought it would be. It actually was more of a character study on these middle-aged soldiers trying to steal money from these evil people, but at the same time, their motives are kind of wonky because they're literally only doing this for their own personal profit. So I actually thought it was kind of interesting seeing this movie play out. Wonder Park was as generic as I kind of expected. I didn't go into this movie thinking it was going to be awful, but I just kind of went in thinking this is probably going to be a generic kids film from Nickelodeon, and it was, but even worse, this is supposed to be like the pilot for a Wonder Park TV series. I don't know if those TV series is still being made, but I'm not going to watch it. Captive State, I remember I was going to review this movie, but when the news that James Gunn got rehired for Guardians of the Galaxy came out, I was like, fuck that review, I'm just gonna do a live stream on that, and that's just what happened. You know, Captive State was that boring that I chose to rather do a live stream about one piece of news instead of reviewing the movie. It was so dull that honestly I remember very little about that. I know that John Goodman was in it. He was unremarkable in this movie, unfortunately. Vera Farmiga was in it, and she wasn't all that impressive. Madeline Brewer, who really impressed me in that movie Cam, she had an unforgiving role. She didn't have anything to do, and I was really disappointed by that. I heard some things about The Beach Bum, that it was quirky and kind of an interesting movie, but I couldn't get into it. Matthew McConaughey definitely went all out for this role, but I didn't really think Moondog as a character was one that I particularly liked following. There's one really well done scene that's edited to a song that I thought was really effective, but there wasn't really any other moment like that in the entire film for me. The Highwayman was really boring, and that sucks because this could have been an interesting story, but man, this was just a huge slog to get through, and Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner definitely tried their best, but my god, I could not get invested in this for the life of me. Pet Sematary I thought was solid. I know this didn't get the best reception, but I didn't think it was an all that bad movie. You know, I thought it was actually a pretty solid film, and an ending that gets really fucking dark, but one that I actually kind of liked. I know there's an alternate ending for like the Blu-ray, and that ending also kind of works too, but I really like how dark the original one kind of went too. Jason Clarke did a good job, and I'm forgetting who played his wife, but she was also really good. The wife has the more interesting story in both Pet Sematary movies anyways, so that's kind of expected, but still, in this one, whoever that actress is, name on the screen, she was great in this movie. I went into The Silence thinking it was just going to be a Quiet Place ripoff, because that's exactly what it sounded like, but I mean, it is, but it's kind of not at the same time. I know that it's based on a book that came out before A Quiet Place, but I just didn't really care for this movie. A Quiet Place is a much better movie, a much better horror film. This one is just really generic, but what else would you expect from the director of Wish Upon and Annabelle, the first one. Leica is a really great studio, so I was really excited for Missing Link, and this one just turned out kind of solid, which obviously isn't bad. I don't want to dock this movie just because it wasn't great like a lot of other Leica films. And I do think it's just a little bit better than The Box Trolls, but this movie definitely, I think, could have been a little bit more than what it was, but still, it was a fun movie. Zach Galifianakis and Hugh Jackman had a good chemistry with their characters, and the animation is just drop-dead gorgeous. It's wonderful. Little is another movie similar to What Men Want that was just really, really irritating. irritating throughout, and I had a hard time getting invested in it. Issa Rae was probably my only plus with the movie. I could get behind her character a bit, but just everything about this movie was just overdone for the sake of comedy, and it just wasn't working. High Life, I really wanted to like this movie going in because it's an A24 film. I'm always interested in what they do, and Robert Pattinson is in it. That's really great. I want to see what he does all the time now because he's out of the Twilight phase. But this movie just kind of really disappointed me. I watched this with two other people through Rabbit when Rabbit was still a thing, and one of them was really praising it like, oh man, this was really great, but then me and the other guy were kind of like, nah, this really wasn't for us, you know? So it kind of explains the divisive nature of this film. Even a guy like me who likes more artsy kind of movies didn't really care for this one, or at least the execution of this one. Under the Silver Lake really surprised me too, because I heard some mixed things before the movie was released. It was getting pushed back a bunch, but I actually really like this movie. It's not amazing or anything, but I thought it was a really solid story. A story about conspiracy theories and what that does to a person and whether or not they're actually important to our society or important to a person. And Andrew Garfield, I thought, did a fucking fantastic job carrying this character. He is so good in this movie. This is one of my favorite roles from him. Long Shot was actually really cute. It was a really, really sweet movie. Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen had better chemistry than I expected, so that was really cool. It's really funny. There's a couple things about it that don't necessarily work in the overall picture, but I thought it was just a really fun rom-com. The Last Summer is another Netflix movie that just kind of was whatever to me. I didn't hate it. I didn't know anything about it going in, so I had no prior knowledge of what the movie could have been about. It was just kind of okay to me, and I didn't really get a whole lot out of it, but it wasn't awful, so that's fine. Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, though, I think is a much better Netflix film than that. This was really solid. Zac Efron really carries this character wonderfully of Ted Bundy. You really do get the sense of what a lot of people were feeling around the time, because you don't see him murder anyone in this movie. You get a quick glimpse near the end, but even then it's just a quick kind of breezed over segment. Throughout the entire film, you have not seen him murder anyone, but he's on trial. He's always on the news. He's handsome and good looking. He looks like Zac Efron, and that's obviously a lot of how some people reacted when they saw the trial going on. Like, oh, he's so handsome, how could he have done such terrible things? And I think that's just a really clever way to structure this film as a whole. The Hustle was really bad. This is definitely worse than Isn't It Romantic as far as Rebel Wilson go. At first I was like, this is like the same grade as Isn't It Romantic? But then a twist happened, and I was like, okay, you're ending on a really sour note. Anne Hathaway wasn't even all that good, if I'm going to be entirely honest. They didn't have great chemistry. I just couldn't get into this film. The Sun Is Also a Star is really boring, and I forgot a whole lot of what happened. Same thing with The Souvenir. This was supposed to be really great, but it kind of wasn't for me. I was hoping for a lot more from an A24 drama, but it didn't really do much for me. Charlie Says is definitely better than The Haunting of Sharon Tate, but it's still no Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as far as Charles Manson kind of movies go, even though Once Upon a Time isn't entirely about that. But this one was just kind of for me. It had some interesting moments, but it just couldn't really capture my attention entirely. The Professor is definitely more of a different take for a Johnny Depp movie. This is more of a drama, obviously, but it's not really one of Johnny Depp's best just because of that. I found this movie really tediously boring, an interesting premise that unfortunately just didn't have the best execution in my eyes. It could have been the kind of role in movie that Johnny Depp kind of needed to kind of revitalize his career, to prove that he's more than just what a lot of people have been saying about his acting, but unfortunately this movie just isn't that. See You Yesterday is a really kind of brilliant concept, one that was actually kind of cool, but I just found the movie overall to be kind of mediocre. I know a lot of people will kind of like this one, but I feel like this is just another kind of just straight down the middle kind of Netflix movie, and I really hated the ending. The ending was just way too abrupt, and I did not really care for that. Booksmart was really well done. Olivia Wilde did a really great job directing her first feature, especially when it gets really weird with the stop motion animation part later on in the movie, and there's a certain moment where the audio kind of drowns out and the music plays over an argument. It was really well directed and really well edited, and I can't wait to see what else Olivia Wilde has to offer as far as her directing works go. And Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein had terrific chemistry, but Billie Lourd honestly kind of steals this movie. She is so good in this movie. She is so fucking wonderful. The Perfection was actually kind of decent. You know, this movie kind of started off and I didn't know where it was going to go, but it actually ended up in a place that I actually enjoyed. I honestly kind of want to watch this movie again to see if the grade kind of bumps up, because right now I kind of have it at a B-, but I have a lot of positive things to remember about it, you know, because I actually did like this movie, so I honestly do want to kind of give it a shot again at some point. Rim of the World is a Netflix movie that I never want to watch again. This movie is god-awful. Of course, what else would I expect from a McG film? The dialogue is terrible, the acting is terrible, an okay premise, but with terrible execution with the directing and writing and the visual effects. My word. I don't understand how you could make something that bad. Rocketman is basically exactly what Bohemian Rhapsody could have been, a really well-made, inspired biography with some really wonderful acting that actually accurately portrays the man that they actually have, unlike Bohemian Rhapsody. I honestly think Taron Egerton should have gotten an Oscar nom for this role because he is that incredible as Elton John. He does all his own singing and he is wonderful. Of course, he did sing that Elton John song in Sing, I'm Still Standing, so basically I think Sing was pretty much his tryout for this movie, but still, I'm so glad they casted him. He's wonderful. Richard Madden is really great too in it, and Bryce Dallas Howard, oh my god, she gets so cruel at certain parts, but she pulls it off wonderfully. Ma was fun. I honestly didn't really expect much going in, but it was a little bit fun for a Blumhouse movie. It wasn't terrible, it wasn't great, it could have been, but I had fun with it. This is another one similar to The Perfection where I could maybe see myself watching it again to see if it bumps up the B- grade, but Octavia Spencer really killed it in her role. I honestly thought they did a solid job with this film. The Last Black Man in San Francisco is another really good movie by A24. As far as the most popular A24 releases like A Midsummer or Hereditary, this one kind of fits in well with The Hole in the Ground as far as how many general audience members would know what this movie is just by saying the name, but it was a really good movie, and I hope you check it out because it deserves more attention. I Am Mother, I heard some more praise for this one, kind of like See You Yesterday, but unfortunately, I just couldn't get into this one either. This was another straight down the middle Netflix movie for me. I don't know what it is with Netflix putting out movies that I find just really mediocre straight down the middle, but sometimes putting out something that I still find mediocre but some people really like. I don't know what the deal is with that. Late Night was a movie that I heard some kind of buzz about, but I still didn't really get too excited after seeing the trailer. And yeah, it's pretty much just kind of a generic comedy film that feels like it was made for TV at some point, you know, and that kind of really did the movie a huge disservice in my opinion. The Dead Don't Die was really quirky. It's another movie that once again I kind of want to watch again to see if my opinion has changed, but it's just so quirky and weird that I honestly had a solid time with it. You know, maybe my grade will go down from a B- when I rewatch it, but I just remember just being kind of pleasantly surprised at just how funny I found the movie. I don't know, maybe I'm just the weirdo in that entire theater because everyone in the theater was like, well, that was some bullshit. Murder Mystery is another Netflix film, but it is starring Adam Sandler. It's another one of his ventures with Netflix starring Jennifer Aniston, and it was okay. It wasn't awful like I kind of expected because Adam Sandler, he doesn't really make the best of movies these days unless Happy Madison is not involved, like Meyerowitz Stories or Uncut Gems, but this movie was just kind of okay. As far as like a mystery film goes, I really have a huge kick for mystery films, so unfortunately this movie has a lot of the Happy Madison failed comedic trappings that infest this movie from what could have been a really solid comedy mystery, but it was whatever. It's just another straight down the middle Netflix film. Yesterday kind of offers this Twilight Zone-esque premise where what would you do if an entire music library from this band, the Beatles, was gone, and you had the opportunity to get famous off of that, to examine music industry today, the business side of it, if people would even like these songs today when you bring them up. But unfortunately, they just went with the sappy rom-com kind of approach to making this film, and I just didn't really find that to be interesting, and I think that really bogged the film down from what could have been an interesting kind of examination of society and the industry of music. The Farewell was really good. Lulu Wang did a really great job directing this film, but Awkwafina really impressed me with this movie. Her acting is so good, and she offers up a really human, emotional performance, and it's just something really special. This movie's really sweet. It'll get you smiling. It's just a really sweet film. I don't think it's amazing, and there's definitely a part where they do like text at the bottom of the screen, picture of the real life person kind of ending that, for the context of this movie, maybe they should have just filmed that ending just to kind of wrap things up a little properly, but you know, that I think that's just me. A lot of people really dug the hell out of this movie, and I did too. I just wouldn't call it a masterpiece or anything, but I still really liked it, and it touched my heart. Saving Zoe is your typical kind of straight to DVD kind of thriller movie with Laura Marano from Austin and Ally fame, but it was a little bit better than I expected, only because it got really dark in a certain part where I was like, oh my god, are they really going for this? And they did, and it was actually, it was alright at that point, but I still wouldn't say it's all around great. It is kind of a generic movie though, but one that I would say isn't like straight to DVD garbage. It's just kind of bleh. Secret Obsession is a Brenda Song Netflix stalker movie that was really bad. This one was really, really bad. I can see people watching this with friends and just kind of laughing at the absurdity of where the story goes, but it kind of bums me out though, because this is an interesting-ish kind of premise that just needed some reworking, and then maybe we could have had something kind of special here. The Allstate guy did a really great job acting though. The Art of Self-Defense, I was surprised not too many people talked about more, because I thought this was a really good dark comedy. Jesse Eisenberg's energy, his nervous, shy energy is utilized really well for this character. And this movie goes into some unexpected directions that I really liked, especially how they decided to end the film that had me fucking dying. This movie is a lot funnier than you might be expecting. I hope you give it a shot because this movie, it really delighted me. It was dark and kind of messed up, but it did delight me too at the end of the day. I thought they crafted something really interesting, the examination of toxic masculinity with this movie. A Score to Settle is a Nicolas Cage movie that I forgot everything about, so let's just move on to something else because honestly, I don't remember anything that happened in this movie. I'm sorry, Nick Cage, but you make a lot of garbage like this. The Kitchen, what an interesting premise that unfortunately sucks so bad. It's not like an F for me, but it is one of those movies that just had no idea how to tell its story, I feel. You know, they jump ahead a lot throughout the plot to where you don't really feel like you're being invested in this world. There's a lot of great set design and costume design as far as like getting you into the vibe of the era they're in, but unfortunately, not even the performers or the characters themselves can help lift it up. Elizabeth Moss is probably the best character, her and Domhnall Gleeson at a certain point, but then that just kind of cuts off, and you're just kind of bummed that you're left with Melissa McCarthy and Tiffany Haddish, that granted aren't annoying, but it's just there's nothing to those characters and there's nothing being given to them to help flesh out this world a bit more. The Peanut Butter Falcon is a sweet movie. I don't think it's amazing or anything. I think it has a lot of story issues, but it was a movie that I found really sweet, and Shia LaBeouf definitely gave a good performance here, and we'll be talking about Shia LaBeouf a bit later as well. Good Boys I really like. This is a movie that could have fell flat on its face just from concept alone, but they really managed to pull off something really funny. The three boys, including Jacob Tremblay, have really great chemistry with each other. You buy the fact that they are friends, and they pull off some really hysterical jokes. There are some really funny moments in this movie. None of the jokes feel cheap. None of them are really cringy or just unbearable to sit through. Everything is just kind of smartly put together, and I really had a fun time with this movie. Hustlers wasn't perfect in my eyes, but it was definitely better than I thought. When I saw the trailer, I was like, this looks kind of okay. But this was actually a pretty riveting story. I do wish maybe they spent a little bit more time getting to know specific other characters, but that being said, Constance Wu did a really great job here, and Jennifer Lopez, the hype obviously has led you to believe that she is the best part of this movie, and they would be correct. She is wonderful as this character in this movie, and it's definitely much more interesting than The Goldfinch, which was really boring and really draggy. Oh my god, I actually was excited to see this. I was very interested to see what they could turn out with this movie, but unfortunately it was just such a huge drag. American Dreamer is actually directed by a man that I met. Here's a picture. Derek Bort. He's directed some other films like London Town, The Joneses with David Duchovny. Unfortunately, this movie just wasn't all that good in my eyes. You know, this one was very generic. I'm a big fan of Jim Gaffigan as a comedian, and he didn't do a bad job portraying this character, but it just, there's a lot about this movie that feels cheap. This movie was filmed, I think, entirely in Norfolk, and you definitely feel like there's certain moments where it feels like they're cramped and they can't really do like great shots, you know what I mean? Like it feels like the camera is really awkwardly confined. The story kind of cuts out at one point and you're kind of left wondering, well, I kind of wanted to see where this could continue. It unfortunately had an interesting idea, but it just didn't really have the proper execution backing it. I think maybe it deserved a little bit more than the kind of cheap nature of it all. Rambo Last Blood was fucking horrible. This movie sucks so bad that it is racist as shit, and I've heard a lot of people saying, like, no, it's not racist. I can't believe people are saying that. Let me ask you this, and this is all I'll say about the movie, because a lot of people have already talked up to death about how terrible this is. But when you have a plot point where a woman has to travel over the Mexican border just to get into sex trafficking, then Rambo has to cross over the border and bring her dead body back at some spoilers. He has to bring her dead body back, but he has to drive through the gate of the border. Like he has to drive at a certain point where there are no guards and just drive through a fucking fence, and that means that the sex traffickers in Mexico have to find their way across the border just to get to Rambo to get revenge because he killed some people of theirs. At that point, you have to ask yourself, well, sex trafficking is a pretty big issue here in America too. How come you couldn't just set it in America? You know what I mean? Because that is something that happens here too. Why do you have to set it in Mexico? Is it because Mexicans are scary, thus making the sex trafficking scarier? But it just makes the crossing over the border subplot much more complicated. But I guess they just said, screw it, it's scarier to have scary Mexicans, but it's good that Rambo is slicing them up. This good old American man slicing up these disgusting Mexicans. That was fucking awful. I don't care who you are. that is fucking racist, and it's fucking unnecessary, and it doesn't help that the action also pretty much sucks. It's poorly made, it's a terribly made story, and Sylvester Stallone was barely trying. It didn't even feel like it was the same Rambo character. They just gave him like a flashback PTSD moment at one point, but that's not enough. Villains was a solid movie, though. This was, in some ways, it reminded me of Don't Breathe, but this was a solid movie, you know, not perfect. It definitely had the potential to be something really, really fantastic, but it has a couple issues throughout, though. But I thought the acting was really good. You have Bill Skarsgård doing well, and Micah Monroe. They have really great chemistry with each other, and the couple, I forget what their names are, but they were also really good. They hammed it up, but they had great chemistry too. This was a fun thriller. The Death of Dick Long I was really interested in because it's from one of the directors of Swiss Army Man, and this movie did not really disappoint. I found this movie really fascinating. It's such an interesting weirdo story that goes in some unexpected places, but I was fucking engaged the entire time. That I would definitely, it's not going to be for everyone. It's not that they show anything like graphic or anything, it's just there's certain things that you learn that might disgust you with you hearing about it. That's all I can really say to describe it, but it is one that I would recommend checking out just to see the absurdity of it all. Between Two Ferns is obviously a really fun web series, but as a movie, you can definitely tell that there's not much to this as far as making a movie goes. But it was fun when they did the segments, but when they had to actually craft a narrative, not so much. Pain and Glory, I watched this movie because Antonio Banderas got nominated for an Oscar for it, and he was great in this movie. And it was also a really good movie. It was a very interesting take on this man who has aged, feels like maybe his glory days are behind him, and is now dealing with his morality. Judy is a mediocre movie that is saved by a great actress in Renee Zellweger playing Judy Garland, who honestly really does deserve the Oscar nom. I don't think I would pick her to win, but she is incredible in this movie. I cannot argue with the nomination. She does such a fantastic job bringing this part of Judy Garland, her life, to life. I do wish that they maybe explored a lot more of her life than what they did show, but at the same time, they got a really great performance out of this woman. I just kind of wish that maybe they went a bit more with it. In the Tall Grass, I found to be a fun, decent Netflix movie. I know it's based off a Stephen King novella, but I found it fun. It was enjoyable. It's not amazing or anything, but it was enjoyable. I know this movie got some hate, but I don't really see it because I had fun with it. Jexy was fucking terrible. There's a couple one-liners that Rose Byrne gives as the Jexy app, which, you know, that was kind of funny, but for the most part, I just found this movie really irritating and just kind of obnoxious. Little Monsters was a Hulu film, and this was really fun. I had a really fun time with this. Lupita Nyong'o, obviously not as good as her performance in Us, which is just a tour de force, but even here, she does a really great job embodying exactly what you'd imagine from a teacher performance. It doesn't feel like a fake and phony performance for a teacher that an actor just doesn't know how to get. Like, she actually kind of really does capture this kind of elementary school kind of vibe. And Josh Gad has some really funny moments in this movie as well. This movie is really funny, but also has a really great character arc in our main guy, and I had a really fun time with this. El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. I binge watched all of Breaking Bad to prepare for this movie, and it's a fantastic show. And this movie, though it obviously wasn't the most necessary thing ever to see, it was definitely a welcome end to the Jesse Pinkman storyline. We could have just had him end with him driving off at the end of Breaking Bad, but I'm glad we got to see him at least one more time. Aaron Paul is obviously a fantastic actor, and this movie did a really great job of closing that character out for good, as well as giving some other insight into the series of Breaking Bad as a whole. Zombieland Double Tap, I actually did a review for this movie for my class, so I'm just going to insert it here right now because fuck it. I never uploaded this because it's too short for a video, and I think I maybe address the class. I don't know, but I did it for like some thing. I don't remember, but here's the review. Hello everybody, my name is Jackson Fulcher, and I'm here to review Zombieland Double Tap for you guys. This is of course the sequel to the 2009 film that had a moderate success in the box office during its run, but went on to have a very huge cult following for the past 10 years. Now this sequel has actually been in development for a while. It's just that the writers, director, and even the cast have gone on to be really busy after this film actually kind of put them more on the map. Finally though, after 10 years of waiting for this film, the sequel is made. So although this movie didn't turn out as good as the first film, it's still able to capture that same magic that makes it so entertaining to begin with, and I was able to really enjoy it thanks to the cast that we have here. Jesse Eisenberg and Woody Harrelson especially are always really good at what they do. Woody Harrelson's Tallahassee obviously steals the show once again. They give him plenty of moments to shine as per usual, but I was also really impressed to see Abigail Breslin and Emma Stone back in these roles because it's been a while since they've been in a comedy film like this, and I know they've done other films that are comedic, but as far as the same comedic styling, they've kind of altered since then, and they're still able to pull it off very well. All of these characters are still very well played. The writing is once again very strong, thanks to Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick. They're very clever together. Ruben Fleischer as a director came up with some really fun action sequences that had me entertained. And this movie also has some new characters that I actually really did enjoy for the most part. There's one in particular, Madison, played by Zoe Deutsch, who I really enjoyed seeing in this movie, because her character at her core is very basic, kind of like the dumb character, but they give her some jokes that actually make her really work. This movie is obviously not perfect. There are certain jokes that don't really land. There's a couple times where the budget kind of shows and the effects don't look as good. There's a new character that they introduced that just didn't have enough substance to them for me to really latch on or really care about that subplot. And there's also one moment where they kick off the beginning of the arcs for certain characters, and the way they went about it, it just felt like they took one scene at the second act of the first Zombieland and just did it again, but they didn't really do anything that new with it. I like where the arc eventually went, but the setting up of that arc just felt really lazy. But overall, I had a really decent time with Zombieland Double Tap. Despite its issues, I was still able to enjoy our characters. The main ones from the last film still had that same magic, and the new characters they had, they also brought something to this film comedically. It's very funny, it's fun at certain parts, and overall, it's just a really good time. It's not scary, obviously, but if you're a fan of zombie movies and you're a fan of what they did in Zombieland 1, then this will give you enough zombie thrills to be really entertained, especially the mid-credit scene of this movie. That kind of is comedic gold and better than the rest of the movie somehow. Hope you check out the movie and enjoy it if you really want to, and thank you all for watching my review. I'll see you guys next time. The Laundromat was boring. I did not care for this movie. I was really excited, though, because it's a Soderbergh movie and it had a good cast, but this movie just kind of left me very underwhelmed. Same with Wounds. This movie kind of had me for a while. This is another Hulu movie. It kind of had me engaged for the longest time, but then it kind of all started to fall apart, and then the ending happened, and they didn't really give you any kind of satisfying conclusion or clarify or anything. This is one of those movies that's ambiguous, but it doesn't really feel like they earned it either. It was just really disappointing. It had me for a bit. I was interested, but it really let me down. Dolomite Is My Name, however, was a fantastic Netflix film, giving a fantastic performance from Eddie Murphy, who does a really great job of portraying this kind of self-made kind of fame that this character of Dolomite really believes in. You really root for this guy, despite him obviously not being the most experienced like filmmaker or actor around. You honestly really do get behind him, though, because of how likable Eddie Murphy is and how they show his life beforehand. And it makes you want to explore Rudy Ray Moore's actual Dolomite films. Countdown, I saw this with a group of friends, and we all laughed at it because it was fucking nonsense. It was terrible. It was a really bad movie. It had a couple parts where they had humor that was actually kind of funny, but then there's other parts that were just unintentionally funny, where I thought they just were falling flat on their face because the movie was so bad. The ending is also just a sequel bait that I hated. If we get Countdown 2 in the future, I will hate you forever, STX Entertainment. Jojo Rabbit was incredible. This movie, I thought, did a really great job of balancing drama as well as its comedic satire on Nazi Germany. I thought they did a really great job. It's one of those movies where the highlight going in with the trailers was Taika Waititi playing Hitler, and he's really good in the movie, but when you go into it expecting him to be the standout scene stealer, and you walk out actually thinking, nah, Roman Griffin Davis, actually, he maintains control over this entire film. He's a wonderful child actor. Thomasin McKenzie's really great here. Sam Rockwell is good. Rebel Wilson didn't get under my skin with annoying me, so that's good. And Scarlett Johansson did a fantastic job. There's a wonderful scene where, I'm sure you already know, I won't spoil it, but the butterfly scene. Fucking tragic and made me tear up. It was wonderful, but Taika Waititi handled it wonderfully. The King is a Netflix movie that I didn't think was mediocre. I just kind of thought was decent. There's a couple good parts in here, but I wouldn't really see myself watching it again, because it is kind of one of those movies where it's a one and done, but not really because it's too disturbing and I can't handle it again, but just kind of like, I don't really need to watch it again. You know, it was kind of borderline boring. Not boring, but almost boring, if you know what I mean. Motherless Brooklyn, going in, I was worried for Edward Norton because I didn't think in the trailer they were showing the best of his performance. And yeah, that performance was really kind of cringy. It kind of made me uncomfortable. But that's kind of the least of this movie's worries, because although it does have an interesting kind of premise, and I know it's based off a book, but I just didn't think the execution was all there. Daniel Pemberton had a wonderful score for this film, but I just really couldn't get too engaged with any of the other characters or the situation as a whole. I found this movie just kind of draggy. Harriet should have been a lot better than what it was, but this is just going to be one of those movies that teachers play for their kids when they learn about Harriet Tubman in school at some point. So that's a little disappointing. Cynthia Erivo obviously does a really great job, but the movie just, it should have been a lot better than what it was. And I didn't really like the use of her belief in God as like a superpower at some point. Like that was a little too much. I didn't really care for that bad at all. Lady and the Tramp actually ended up being the best Disney live-action remake of the entire year, and I'm not sure how that's possible because this is the one that I think I was the least excited for, but here we are. It actually ended up surprising me, and Tessa Thompson and Justin Theroux did a solid job, and their chemistry was on point. It's not perfect, and I don't think it's better than the cartoon, but it was definitely better than what I expected. Noelle was just kind of a mediocre Christmas Disney movie, and it just kind of made sense to me that this would go straight to Disney Plus because this isn't one that would particularly do well in theaters, I think, and it shouldn't be in theaters anyway. Charlie's Angels I didn't hate, but it definitely should have been a lot better than what it was. I know Elizabeth Banks had a lot of passion for this, and so did the three actresses, but a lot of this movie was poorly directed. The action sequences were at times so bad that I just had to check out of the entire movie. The plot was predictable, and a lot of the humor fell completely flat. Kristen Stewart is obviously a good actress, but she's the one who's kind of just saying random stuff, and she's supposed to be the scene stealer because of that, and I didn't think any of the jokes that she was saying really worked. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was really sweet. Tom Hanks really does a great job embodying the essence of Mr. Rogers, but I was really happy that this movie wasn't exactly about him, because we have the documentary for that. I do like that this was just about Matthew Rhys's character, a real-life author that was writing an article about him and how Mr. Rogers eventually went on to impact his life. I thought they did a really great job handling that. And the director, Marielle Heller, did a really great job directing this because this movie is actually kind of framed up like an actual Mr. Rogers episode, so you get those moments where you get the old kind of cinematography, the TV camera, and Tom Hanks is doing the whole spiel. It's wonderfully done. It's wonderfully brought back, and the score by Nate Heller was also really great. I believe that's her brother or maybe cousin or something, but he did a really great job too, like really bringing the entire essence of this movie. It was really sweet. It made me tear up. Really great movie. 21 Bridges was enjoyable at times, but it was definitely just kind of okay at the end of the day. It had an interesting-ish premise, but just kind of some lackluster kind of execution. The Irishman was really great. I know a lot of people don't want to watch it because it's 3.5 hours long, and no one wants to watch that for some reason. They can't pause and then come back to it another day. But this movie was really great. It's a wonderful film from Scorsese, and I don't know if we'll ever see a movie with De Niro, Pacino, or Pesci together ever again, or even Harvey Keitel, but they all really killed it in this movie, especially Pesci, who did something that I wasn't expecting going in, more reserved, not the loud screaming Pesci that we've seen before, and De Niro's character actually has a lot more humanity to him, which was wonderful. They go in some really sad directions too near the end of the film that kind of got to me, and I wasn't really expecting it. The Report's a simple movie, but I thought they did a really great job bringing this to the screen. Adam Driver obviously is probably the standout in the entire cast, but this movie isn't really anything too amazing or anything, and it could have been, but it was a decent reporting on what had happened in this time period with these documents. Queen and Slim was really good too. Daniel Kaluuya and Jodie Turner-Smith, I believe that's her name, they had really great chemistry with each other. I bought into their romance as the film continued, and it definitely had me on the edge of my seat at a couple times, and the ending of this movie is really tragic, but it's something that felt way too real. But this movie was definitely worth the watch. I would definitely recommend you check this out. Playmobil, the movie though, don't watch this. Even if you have kids, don't show them this nonsense. Anya Taylor-Joy I liked. This isn't horrible, but it definitely pains me that I was watching this movie and it felt so much like a Lego Movie ripoff, just with new musical numbers that sucked so bad, and at one point it sounded like they had too much auto-tune, and it was really bad. But of course it has live action sequences, so it's supposed to be like the Lego Movie. It's supposed to be good, but I feel like they completely missed the point. Like, the Lego Movie makes you feel special that you like Lego so much. Like, they really bring out the magic that is these toys and why everyone can get behind it. Playmobil doesn't do that. It's just kind of nonsense. They could have had something emotional, but I don't think they delivered well. Dark Waters was decent. I didn't think this was amazing, as some people have said, but it is a solid movie that it has an important story that more people should definitely see. I just maybe wish that the movie was a bit more stronger to support it. Portrait of a Lady on Fire just hit Hulu, and it is a fantastic movie. I saw it a couple weeks back, and I definitely recommend you watch this movie because it is so beautiful. The cinematography, the camera work is so fucking good. The colors are so vibrant, and the actresses, oh my word, they have such good chemistry with each other, and I really dug every single character, and the ending, it got me really big, man. So I would definitely, even though it's in subtitles, please watch this movie. Honey Boy, now this was one that was really good and made even better by Shia LaBeouf's performance. He wrote this movie. It's semi-autobiographical as well, and you could really feel the genuine kind of emotion that went into crafting this movie, and Shia LaBeouf's performance as his father, crushing. He's too good at playing this kind of dad that is he's not good. He's not the best dad, but there's certain things about him that you can find kind of charming, like if you're his son, but he is not the best father, and in some scenes he goes really dark, and you could really tell that he was really pulling for it, and it's such a hard watch, but I definitely recommend it. It is kind of powerful. In Fabric I was excited for because it looked like a weirdo art house horror film from A24, and it was solid. It mostly lived up to what I expected. At some point the story shifted to something else that I didn't expect that, but hey, I thought it was kind of cool what they were doing. I don't think it's perfect or anything, and it's not going to be for everyone. Like, I know a lot of people might be like, yeah, but I liked Hereditary and I like Midsummer. Like, no, this is a little bit weirder than both of those movies. This isn't like, it's weird but more digestible to like a mainstream audience. Like, this is more art house weirdo horror film, but I had fun with it. Six Underground was not good. I know a lot of people like the Bayhem, the Michael Bay craziness, but I can't get behind it when the movie doesn't even really feel like a movie, you know? Every single character is just kind of shallow to me, and it's not particularly funny, and I just couldn't care for this movie. I thought it made sense why I went to Netflix, because it doesn't really feel like a movie just with Michael Bay explosions and action sequences. It just feels like Michael Bay action sequences with a lackluster kind of plot thread needling them together. Black Christmas, I think Chris Stuckman just went over this film really well, but yeah, this movie was fucking garbage. And I know this movie has the kind of shield of, well, I'm not a woman, so obviously this wasn't made for me. This movie's overly feminist and you just hate feminism. It's not that, okay? Trust me, I don't hate feminism. I don't hate the core ideals of feminism, and I don't hate women. And there are movies out there that have been released that have maybe been geared more so towards women that I have actually enjoyed myself. This movie's just a bad movie. You know, it had a rushed production, and it had terrible screenwriting, terrible scares, terrible acting, terrible characters, and a too abrupt ending. This movie just sucks, and I don't think you need to make a social statement out of a movie sucking really bad. Richard Jewell was really good too. I do not like the Olivia Wilde character, because Olivia Wilde, as much as I loved her directorial debut Booksmart, I didn't really think her performance here was all that good. And also, when you learn that the real life person was probably misrepresented in this movie, and this movie is all about telling the truth about Richard Jewell, it gets a little muddled there. And I also didn't really buy how personal John Hamm kind of got with the Richard Jewell case, but it was a solid movie to watch nonetheless. Richard Jewell's an interesting man to examine, and Paul Walter Hauser does a really great job, and Kathy Bates has really emotional scenes that she really delivers really well. Bombshell was a decent movie. I was kind of hoping for a bit more, because I thought the Loudest Voice TV show was really good, and this is obviously expanding on that a bit more, focusing on different women, whereas the Loudest Voice was mostly just on Roger Ailes and Gretchen, and this one had Gretchen and then Megyn Kelly, and Margot Robbie's character was a amalgamation of a bunch of other people, but unfortunately it was just kind of okay. It was decent, it was enjoyable, but I just didn't really think it was everything it could have been. The Two Popes, I know a lot of people were praising the screenplay and the two actors, and yeah, they're good together, but I just was so bored by this. Maybe it's because I'm an atheist and I don't care about Christianity or popes, but I just found this movie really uninteresting. The Aeronauts could have been better, but it was solid. You know, I didn't think it was like mediocre as for like an Amazon Prime movie. I thought Aeronauts was actually kind of enjoyable, even though it could have had the potential to be really great. Little Women was really good too. I recently rewatched Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird. I know I made a video where I said this was just mediocre, but I actually like it now. I like Lady Bird a lot more now. And Little Women was really good too. Saoirse Ronan is great. Timothy Chalamet and Laura Dern is great, and Florence Pugh, my love. Florence Pugh is wonderful in this movie. There's a lot of great things about this movie, and if you got confused by the jumping around of like time periods, then I don't know what to say to that, because this movie was really simple to follow for me. Spies in Disguise I was not excited for. I thought this was going to be some bullshit, but it was actually kind of solid. It was fun cartoon wackiness with some fun characters with Tom Holland and Will Smith, and I actually had a fun time with it. Had me laughing more than I expected, and Ben Mendelsohn really does a good job playing a villain, even in animated form, so there's that too. Just Mercy was really good and really effective. I was so happy I got to see this movie, because it really got to my heart. Like, Alabama just kind of sucks. I'm not going to say everyone in Alabama is terrible and racist, but this movie does not paint Alabama well, and for good reason, obviously, because of the dark stuff that goes on with this movie, but I think this is an important story that I'm honestly kind of bummed didn't get more Oscar consideration, at least like maybe Jamie Foxx for like Best Supporting Actor or something like that. I was surprised this movie didn't get much. And finally, Cats. This movie, I saw this with theater friends. I used to be in high school theater. I went to see this with some theater friends, and we all had different reactions. I was laughing and looking at two other people in disbelief, and we were laughing together. And then I had a friend who was so mad that at one point he walked out of the theater and almost left, and another friend of ours had to walk out and convince him to stay. They took a 10-minute breather outside the theater and eventually came back. And at one point we thought the movie was ending, and that's when Judi Dench started talking to the audience, and that's when we just fucking lost it. There was two women sitting next to me. I was at the end of our row. Two women were sitting next to me, and I felt so bad, but we were fucking dying. We were cracking up, maybe annoying those two, but we couldn't help it. This movie sucked that bad, and it was just too funny. And after that ending where Judi Dench is talking to the audience about like dogs sucking and cats ruling or whatever, and the credits started to play, my friend just like started like screaming like that movie sucked, like so loud when people were still in the theater, and we were still fucking dying. This movie is wonderful, but in all the wrong ways. Please go watch Cats since you can't leave your house. So yeah, that's the end of the catch-up. I'm sorry I couldn't do reviews for all these. I'm trying to do better this year with doing reviews, obviously. I think I've done a solid job with that so far, so look forward to another year of continuing to review movies. Even if a bunch of stuff is being pulled, there's still a bunch of streaming stuff that I can watch and other stuff that I haven't yet seen. But anyways, what are your thoughts on any particular movie here? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time, but remember to stay safe, stay healthy, social distance, self-quarantine, wash your hands. Just take care of yourself, guys. Love ya.